Here's a question I got a lot when I went to the Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters. If you've seen that video on Genetically Modified Skeptics channel, in the video, I went to the other branch office, the Patterson branch, and I roll up in a car and we're stopped by security. They start like spouting off names and stuff, and some of those names were bleeped out. Now, I didn't talk about this before. I've never talked about this publicly, just with a few friends and stuff, or in the podcast pre-show or whatever on Discord. I've never talked about the names that they gave. So here's the thing. Let me just tell you the name that they gave and explain why it's important. So we roll up and we're stopped by security, and it turns out I've found out since this happened that the security guard that they sent to us was a circuit overseer for somebody who was telling me about this for a while. This guy was actually directly involved in covering up the child abuse scandal in the religion. The governing body, the branch office, they knew that this guy was a bulldog, and that's why they sent him to deal with me. They knew he was a bulldog and that he would do whatever it took to bring me down, pretty much. That's why they sent him to deal with me specifically. So we roll up, and God, I'm reliving all of this stuff now. It was really, really stressful when it happened. It still just brings so much stress and pain just to think about. But we roll up, and the guy comes up to the window and starts talking to me. And when I called them originally, I gave them this fake spam email address with a fake name that I set up like forever ago, just because whatever. What information are they going to pull from that? It's a fake email address with like a fake name. And it wasn't even a full name. It was like initials. It was initials to a fake name that I made up. So I roll up, and this is the name that I bleeped in the video. They said, "Are you at all associated with Barbara Anderson?" And I was like, Barbara Anderson? Who the hell is that? I had never heard that name in my life. But they got the last name correct, and that kind of freaked me out a little bit. Like the last name in my fake name email address, they got it right. The last name of the fake email address was Anderson. So that was like, this is a little startling. So I was like, no, I've never heard that name in my life, because that's true. I had never heard of Barbara Anderson before. Well, it turns out that's a real person. I went and looked around and found out who Barbara Anderson is. So let's take a look at this person and just read about her. This is on jwfacts.com. A lot of you guys may know of this website. It's a really, really solid website. It's been around for like decades, I think. It's run by Paul Grundy. Really legit dude. He is the reason for an awful lot of people getting out of the religion. So I have just mad respect for this guy. So there's this article about Barbara Anderson on jwfacts.com. Barbara Anderson, Brooklyn, Bethel. The Discoveries of Barbara Anderson is article written by Barbara about her experiences as a researcher and writer in the Bethel Writing Department in Brooklyn. The file is a 25-page, 720 kilobyte Microsoft Word document. I highly recommend taking the time to download and read her story. Barbara wrote a number of articles for the Watchtower publications and was one of the researchers for the Proclaimers book, which is actually a really, really important book for Jehovah's Witnesses. She became involved in research on pedophilia for a number of articles released in the 1990s. Eventually, her conscience no longer allowed her to be associated with the Watchtower Society, particularly due to the governing body's refusal to change Watchtower policy that protects pedophiles. Barbara's letter to the governing body is a letter from 2012 regarding the July 2011 Watchtower article describing as mentally diseased those that leave the religion over doctrinal issues. Judgment Day Must Wait by Paul presents a complete history of the ideology of the Watchtower Society and its focus on Judgment Day. It includes a chapter on the topic of child abuse written by Barbara Anderson, which was a forerunner to her life story, Discoveries of Barbara Anderson. So basically this person, Barbara Anderson, she was a writer and a researcher for the writing department at Brooklyn Bethel. Let's read her letter to the governing body. This is a letter from Barbara Anderson to the Watchtower Society after she left. In 1517, Martin Luther wrote in a letter to Archbishop Albert of Mainz, "You must graciously forgive that I, that scum of the earth, am so bold as to dare to address a letter to you. Yes, I know you think of me as scum, like the Mainz believed of Luther, wondering how I dare write you a letter. Someone Jehovah's Witnesses disfellowshipped back in 2002. I was accused of being an unrepentant sinner and condemned for causing divisions, then labeled apostate because I spoke out publicly on NBC's Dateline TV program about the child sexual abuse policies that protected pedophiles, policies that you helped formulate. Now do you remember me? I bet you do. For acting out of conscience, it's certainly uncalled for to be shunned as an apostate and viewed as dead by my family and friends. But according to the July 15th, 2011 Watchtower, I'm also mentally diseased because it states that all apostates are mentally diseased. Injuries from a physical attack can heal, but experts say insults and name-calling can cause emotional pain that lasts a lifetime. That's why there is a saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. You know that words can cut like knives, and it appears that's why you use words in Watchtower literature that can damage those who differ with the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's been nearly 20 years since I walked your hallowed carpets. I loved every minute of it, except for the 2 times I crossed swords with 2 of your staff members at different occasions over the unethical and dishonest practices. One of those staff members is still in your midst. Back then, I believed in the integrity of your staff writers. I thought they were loyal to God and never underhanded with respect to religious truth. But much investigation proved to me that some writing department writers are incompetent and some are just plain dishonest. If I said the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses is as bona fide as snake oil, that it is poppycock and bunkum, I've never heard those words before, many in our politically correct society would consider my words offensive and hurtful. Yet, Watchtower staff writers believe they can get away with twisting the scriptures, using them against those who question doctrines and policy, and do it with impunity, such as recently claiming, well, apostates are mentally diseased, and they seek to infect others with their disloyal teachings. First of all, that's ridiculous. Paul didn't say anything about apostates. The Watchtower did. And he didn't say in verse 4, he, any man that teaches other doctrines, is mentally diseased. The words mental disease describes a bodily condition. Paul said he, but being mentally diseased over questionings and debates about words. These men literally doted, craved questioning and disputes over Jesus' words to such an extent that the craving for controversy was like a sickness. Since there was no reasoning with such corrupt men, Paul urged that Timothy not waste his time with them. I don't have an argument with you about your translation of the Greek word nocio as mentally diseased, or any comparable words used in other translations. My argument is not with the Apostle Paul's negative description of the mindset of his primary opposers who were pseudo or false brothers or false teachers, questioning and debating a particular matter. However, I do take issue with your interpretive application of his words. The first followers of the Jew, Jesus Christ, were Jewish, and they continued to follow the law of Moses. Early Hellenized Jewish Christian believers, referred to as Judaizers, obsessively argued over the words of Christ, insisting that Gentile Christians get circumcised and observe the Mosaic law. Acts 15:5 said some former believers were Pharisees. Paul mentions his struggles with this group in at least 5 of his letters. Clark's commentary rightly said these Judaizers were not apostles nor apostolic men, but they were undoubtedly members of the Church of Ephesus. So she's basically arguing that apostates are not mentally diseased and that they made up the whole apostate thing themselves by using the scriptures, which is pretty awesome, actually. She seems like a legit person. She goes on to say, the issue was between Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians, and Paul's advice was well-timed and specific, certainly not suitable more than 2,000 years later. Yes, I know about Romans 15:4, where Paul said that all the things that were written aforetime were written for our instruction. Contextually, he was pointing to his time, not ours. For Watchtower writers to take an actual historical event when Jewish Christians taught Gentile Christians a completely different doctrine, the observance of the Mosaic law, and then dedicated a phrase found in 1 Timothy 6:4, one that referred to these men who did not consent to Christ's words to former Jehovah's Witnesses is ludicrous and wrong. In the July 15th, 2011 simplified version of The Watchtower, published for children and others who have only very basic reading skills, the author placed a box on page 11 where mentally diseased apostates, quote-unquote, and quote-unquote false teachers are defined as people who rebel against true worship and abandon it. In this way, you harmfully labeled those who left the religion. Thus, you planted fear in the minds of the readers, most of whom are naive and innocent and easy prey for charlatans to influence. Our 12-year-old grandson, Luke, aware that his grandparents left the witness religion in 2002 and are now shunned, has in his mind the frightening thought that we are mentally diseased. And imagine, if you will, how a child will react to a former Jehovah's Witness parent after reading that those who leave the religion are mentally diseased. You should be ashamed of saying apostates are mentally diseased. Hateful words that vilify and denigrate people whom you perceive as sinners because they can't accept some of the Watchtower's teachings and policies that they view as harmful. May I remind you of what you wrote in the February 15th, 2000 Watchtower. The ruling ecclesiastical class violently silenced a voice, Cyril Lucaris in 1638, I'm not sure who that is, that pointed to some of the errors of their non-biblical beliefs. They proved to be among the worst enemies of religious freedom and truth. Sadly, this is a stance that in various ways survives even to our day. It is a sobering reminder of what happens when clergy-investigated intrigues stand in the way of freedom of thought and expression. That's written by the Watchtower Society. Fascinating. In 2000. For over 40 years, I thought you were different than those in the clergy who sought to suppress God-given freedom of thought and expression. But by your words, I have come to know that I was wrong. Yours truly, Barbara J. Anderson. That letter is absolutely fascinating. And the Watchtower Society thought that I was associated with her in some way because of the fake email address that I gave them when I originally signed up. At some point, maybe I should read this on my main channel. It's definitely a worthy read. I didn't know a lot of that stuff about, like, the etymology of the words in the Bible that translate to mentally diseased and things like that. Definitely worth reading. There are probably lots of Barbara Andersons out there, but I came to find that was just too spot on. That name and them asking if I was associated with her and everything, it was just too spot on.